Hey, it's Francis Check from Video Realm Media, and today we're going to be taking a look at our two products, Fractal Rama and Locust Pack. And here's what we're going to be creating today. So if you're not sure what Fractal Rama and Locust Pack is, basically it's two packs which contain 10 planets and 30 pre-rendered fractal stills. These two packs were inspired from the Star Trek Into Darkness credits made by Video Copilot, so you can create some very similar looking space scenes. So if you ever wanted to create any sort of awesome looking space scene, then this is the pack for you. And in the Locust Pack plus Fractal Rama bundle, we include an After Effects project file which has a pre-rendered scene, so you can add your own planets, add in some asteroids, and you're ready to go. Okay, so now we're in After Effects, and the first thing that we're going to want to do is create a new composition. So let's go up to Composition, New Composition, and we'll name this as Main Comp. And we'll keep it at 1920 by 1080p. Let's hit OK. Then go up to Layer, New, and Solid. And we'll just name this as Element 3D. And we'll just make this a blue color. Okay. And then let's scroll down on our Effects and Presets panel, and let's go down to Video Copilot and locate Element 3D and drag that onto our new layer. Once you've done that, let's go ahead and click on Scene Setup. Okay, so now that element is loaded up, let's go ahead and go over to Locust Pack, Planets, and I'm going to use Planet 1. Okay, so here's our planet loaded into our scene, and the first thing I'm going to want to do is change the color of the illumination map on this planet. In Locust Pack, we include different illumination maps for each of the planets, so that way you can customize it easily. So I want to change this one to blue, so we'll go to Planet 1. And we'll go down to the illumination, right click, and we'll go to Show and Explore. And a File Explorer or Finder window should show up on your Mac or PC. And you'll see that there's 3 different illumination maps for this specific planet. And I want the blue one, which is the illumination ice. So I'll just click and drag that onto our illumination slot. So now you can see that our planet now has that blue illumination map on it. And also, if you didn't want illumination maps, you could just scroll down to the illumination settings and just crank this all the way down, and then you would just have the raw planet model. Next, we're going to want to go ahead and add a glow around our planet. So the easiest way to do this is to duplicate the model of your planet by right-clicking and clicking on Duplicate Model. And then we'll go down to our Planet 1 texture on the duplicated model, and we'll right-click and click on Duplicate and Replace. Next, let's go down to our texture settings and turn down the diffuse all the way, the glossiness all the way, and the illumination map all the way down. And let's just go down a bit and turn down our specular multiplier all the way down, and also our environment multiplier. And we'll want to be sure and turn our diffuse color to black. So we'll just turn this down to black and hit OK. And then we'll scroll down on our settings all the way down to our advanced settings. So we'll change the blend mode to screen. And then we'll scroll back up to our illumination settings. And what we'll do is we'll get our scale gizmo and just scale it up until you see the whole model become white like this. You should just be able to scale it about 1% or less, and it should show up like this. Then what we'll do is we'll go to our Fresnel value and we'll turn this up all the way. Okay. And then we'll go to our Fresnel bypass and turn this all the way up. And you can also increase your intensity to whatever looks good to you. And we can change the color to more of a bluish color. So right about there. And as you can see, that's kind of creating that sort of glow around our planet. And when we go into the settings into element, we'll be able to add that nice kind of haze around the planet. So next, what we're going to do is we're going to close this folder by hitting that little arrow. We'll double click and we'll call this planet. And hit OK. So next, let's add in our asteroids and rock debris. So let's click on all of the rock layers. Just click on all of these. Okay. And we're going to select all these holding shift. and we're going to drag it out of our planet folder. So there we go. And also I don't want any illumination map on the rocks themselves. So what you can do is go into the material options and just turn down the illumination all the way down to 0%, and you should see the illumination disappear. If you still wanted the illumination maps on the rocks, except you wanted it to match the planets, an easy way to do it is to grab your planet material and drag it on your asteroid debris model and release, and you should see that now it matches the planet texture. Okay, so now that we have all of our rocks loaded into our element scene, let's go ahead and put them in the correct groups. So the high poly asteroid 1, the destroyed rock 2, and destroyed rock 1 will all remain on group 1. However, the rocks 1, rocks 2, and rocks 3 will be put on group 1 and 4. So while you have this window open, just hold down Shift on your keyboard and click 4. And we'll do that for all these. Okay, the reason why I put it on group 1 and 4 is because that we'll need them on group 1 because we will need them in the asteroid field before you reach the planet, and we'll need it on group 4 to create the asteroid ring around the planet. So now that we've completed this, let's go ahead and add in our fractals. So let's go over to our Fractal Rama folder and go to planes. And as you can see here, we have 6 planes that come free with Fractal Rama. So if we click on one to load it up, you can see it's this sort of displaced card. So what this means is you can create some volumetric looking effects while maintaining very fast render speeds. And you can color these however you like. You can color them in After Effects, or you can do it right here in the element window. It's really all up to you and what you prefer. So you can really just tweak this and get the look that you like. And these are rendered in 4K, so the quality of these is very high. You can keep zooming and it's very nice. So the next thing we'll want to do is add a folder for the fractals. So we'll click on Add New Group Folder, and we'll drag our plane 1 into this group folder, and then we'll double click on the group folder and we'll name it Fractals, and then hit OK. And now what we can do is if we hold down Alt on our keyboard and rotate these, you can actually see that it's duplicating it. And if we move it in a random direction, we can kind of just put these wherever we want them. And if we keep rotating these in different directions, you'll start to see it looking more like a volumetric effect. And you can just keep on doing this until you get the look that you like. So I'm going to go ahead and create one of these, and then I'll be right back with the results. Okay, so here's what I came up with. It's just basically like a little nebula cloud. And once you start to add color correction inside of After Effects, it can get a little too bright. So I made it's more of like a dim cloud that you can kind of spin around, and it looks like a volumetric fog. And before we hit OK, let's go ahead and change our planet group folder to group 3. Okay, so now let's go ahead and hit OK. And you should see it pop up like this. And this is fine. Let's just go ahead and start adding our cameras and positioning everything. So let's go up to Layer, New, Camera, and we'll leave this at 50mm, and we can just call this Camera, and hit OK. And let's go ahead and go into our Element folder, and our planet is on group 3, so let's go ahead and drop down this menu and go to the Particle Replicator, and go to our Z position, and we'll just push this back in Z space pretty far. And if you see it disappear, that's fine. Basically, it's just going out of the render distance, but we can change that later. And we'll just take it back to about 61,500. And to change the render distance, we'll go to our render settings, and we'll go to our camera cutoff, and we'll change the camera far plane. And what we can do is just add a few zeros, so we just type in 0, 0, 0, 0. And you'll see our planet pop up back there. But it's a bit small, so let's change the size of it. Okay, so let's go up to our particle look, and let's change this to 135. Okay, there we go. Next, let's go ahead and arrange our asteroids and rock debris. So let's close out group 3, go to group 1, so group 1 has our main asteroids. And let's go to the particle replicator, and we'll change the replicator shape to a 3D grid. and we'll change the X to 4, the Y to 4, and the Z to 6. You can adjust these values if you want, but this is just what I'm going to do for this tutorial. And I'm going to change my shape scale to about 11.60. And then next I'm going to go down to my scale XYZ. And I'm going to change the X scale to 5.10. And my Y scale to 2.90. And my Z scale to 24.50. Next thing, I'm going to change my random seed a little bit. Next, let's go into our particle look settings. So let's close out our particle replicator settings and open up particle look. And then we'll go down to multi-object and we'll enable that. And we'll change our size random to 100%. And then we'll change our random rotation. So you can't really see it, but this is the random rotation. We'll change it to 1 and then 96. Also, I'm seeing that these high poly asteroids are a little too large. So let's go ahead and go into our scene setup and change the scale. Okay, so maybe let's change this down to maybe 350. And let's hit OK. And there we go, that looks much better. So now, if you get our camera, you should be able to fly through these without any obstruction. Except for this one object. Okay, so if you run into an object like this, you can go into your group 1 particle replicator settings. We can kind of just move this out of the way, move it up like this. Okay, so now if we zoom out and keep zooming out, you should see, yep, and there we go. So now we have our asteroid field and you can pass through it and there's no obstructions. So the next step is to create a rough animation for your camera. So we know that we want the camera to be closer to the planet. So let's go ahead and zoom in. Maybe right about here. And then we'll just drop down the settings, go to our transform settings on our camera, and we'll click on point of interest, position, and orientation. And then let's go ahead and scroll forward in time to about 7 seconds. And then let's zoom out until we want. It's kind of touchy. So let's just go right about here, just until we can see that edge. Okay. So now if we play this back, and next what we'll do is we'll go to the 3-second mark and we'll hit the add keyframe on the orientation, and we'll go all the way back to the beginning, and let's just position the camera to sort of look to the right of this planet and also rotate it a bit. But there is one problem. As you can see, if once it gets to this point, it kind of just like locks down. It's really jumpy motion, doesn't look smooth at all. So the way to fix that is to right click on the keyframe, this one in particular, the one that's on the 3-second mark, and we'll go to keyframe assistant and we'll go to ease at ease. So now if we go to the beginning, you can see it's a much smoother motion. And you can also play with the rotation and all that. You can move this keyframe around to 4 seconds if you'd like. If you'd want a longer animation until maybe the asteroids reach, you could have it rotating until the 5.5-second mark or whatever your time is. Okay, so that looks pretty good. And next, let's go ahead and add this as an easy ease keyframe as well. And also all the 3 beginning keyframes will be easy ease as well. So first, let's work on the beginning. And we'll go to our position keyframe, and we'll want to just scale this up. We'll move this little line so it'll kind of start gradually and work its way faster towards the asteroids. So you can kind of see it speeds up. This is a speed ramp. Speed up, and then you'll have all your asteroids. It may be a little too slow in the beginning, so we can just speed this up by going like that. You can also slow down the end by dragging this keyframe over. There we go. All right. So now we have our rough animation for our camera. Now we can go ahead and move on to creating the asteroid ring for the planet. So now what we'll do is we'll go into our Element 3D settings and we'll close group 1 and we'll go to group 4. And then we'll go down to our particle replicator settings and we'll change this to a ring. And we can just change this number to something like 24, something around there. So we need to bring our asteroids forward in Z space. So let's hold down Shift and drag to the right, and you should see our rocks, a big pile of rocks, fly forward till it reaches the center of the planet, and you'll see the rocks disappear. So there we go. And then next, what we'll do is we'll change the scale shape to 522, and then we can go down to our rotation and just kind of tweak this a little bit. Just however you like. We could have it rotated this way. It's pretty small. I'm not sure if you can see it. An easier way to see that is if we just change our scale. So let's go into our particle look settings and let's change the particle size to 200. And next let's go down to our multi-object and we'll enable multi-object for this. And we'll change the size to 0.28. And now we can go ahead and close out our multi-object panel and we'll go up to our particle size XYZ. And we'll just kind of squish down the y-axis just a little bit. And then we can bring our z-space back forward towards us to kind of see how this is creating a ring around the planet. So if we were to spin around, you can kind of see how it's creating this asteroid field around the planet. So if we go to the beginning, you can also adjust the rotation of these rings. Okay, so as you can see, we have our rocks around the planet. And now we can go ahead and move on to lighting. So let's go up to Layer, New, and Light. And we'll change this to Parallel Light. And we'll change the intensity to 2015. And we'll change this to a blue color. And we'll just change the light name to Main Light. And make sure that Cast Shadows is checked. And then let's hit OK. Things may become pretty intense. That's all right. All we need to do is change the position. So let's click on our main light and hit P on our keyboard. Let's change the first set of numbers to 140, the second set to -730, and let's change the last group of numbers to 2803. So now we have sort of this backlight on the planet. Okay, so let's create 2 more lights. So let's go up to Layer, New, Light, and this will also be a parallel light. And we'll change the color to more of a lighter blue, so not as saturated. And we'll change the intensity down to something like 260. And let's call this bottom light. And let's hit OK. And let's go to our position. You can just access this by hitting P on your keyboard. And let's change the first set to 140. And let's change the second set to 1350. And let's change our last set to 733. So now you can kind of see we have this bottom light. If we zoom out, you can kind of see it on these rocks as well. So there we go. And let's create one more light. And this is going to be our highlight for this area right here. So let's go ahead and go up to Layer, New, Light. And make sure it's a parallel light. And let's change the color. So it'll be a little bit more saturated. And here's the color code. And let's change this to something like 1490. And we'll call this Bright Light. And we'll hit OK. And let's go ahead and hit P on our keyboard. And we'll change the position. The first set will be -3833. The middle set will be -993. And the last set will be 2803. So now you can kind of see that we're getting all of the lighting on the side of this planet with these 3 lights. So if we scroll through these lights, we first have our main light, which is taking care of basically the back. And then we have our bottom light. And then we have sort of our bright light that's taking care of all the highlights. Another thing that I added in my render was some atmospheric fog to these asteroids. So what I did is I got a fractal out of Fractalrama, and I used the liquify brush in After Effects to kind of make this spinning galaxy effect. And once I had that, I faded out the center where the planet would go. And so I kind of had this nice looking particle twirl. So once I had that, I stacked multiple layers of this same image to make a volumetric looking fog around the asteroids. So if you wanted to do that, we can go into Element 3D and go to our scene setup. and we'll create a new folder, which is right here, and we'll call this fractal ring. Hit OK, and then next we'll go to create and we'll click the plane, and we can scale this up in these little transform settings right here. We can adjust this later, but just make some rough adjustments. And we'll go to our default material for this object, and we'll change the diffuse color to black, and we'll turn off the specular multiplier and environment multiplier, and we'll go down to our illumination settings and change this to 100%, and we'll keep scrolling and we'll change the blend mode to screen, and I'll just grab my texture that I created, so that little twirling effect, and I'll drop it onto our illumination map. So now you'll see we have this twirling image in our viewer. So the way to make this look a little bit more three-dimensional is to keep duplicating it. So we'll move one copy up while holding Alt on our keyboard, and we can just kind of rotate this over, and we can just keep duplicating this, moving it up slightly or down, whichever way looks better. Just rotate a little bit more. Okay, so now that we have it arranged how we want, and we can add all of our color. So you can go into the color and to the illumination map, and you can just change this to whatever color you want. Also, a way to make this look a little bit nicer, if it's showing a little too much, you want it to look a little bit more hard on the edges, just go to your illumination map and you can tweak these settings. These little sliders will compress it or make it brighter. It can make it look much better. And okay, so I've come up with this, and this looks pretty good. I also added some Fresnel to fade off whenever it gets too close to the edge so you can't notice it. And it looks very volumetric. It looks very good. So I'm pretty happy with it. We're going to add this to group 5. So we can close this folder, and our fractal ring will go on group 5. And let's hit OK. Okay, so now let's go to group 5. And let's go down to particle look. And let's just scale this up to about 190. And we can go to our particle replicator effects, and we can change our Z position to about 56,000. And now if we move our X rotation, you can actually see it start to pop up. So we have this sort of texture around the planet. And what we'll want is we want it a little bit tilted, like this. And we can just keep scaling this up until we get it right where we want it. So in this case, we'll keep it right about there. So now if we play forward, you can kind of see how it has this volumetric fog in with these asteroids now. And you can move this up and down however you'd like. Keep it closer or farther. It's really up to you. But it does look pretty nice and adds a lot to this ring. So next, let's add all of our color correction and effects. Okay, so next let's add in our lens flare. So let's go to Layer, New, and then Solid. And we'll just call this Flare and hit OK. And we'll scroll down on our Effects and Presets folder, go to Video Copilot, and let's click and drag the Optical Flares plugin to our new layer. And let's go ahead and click on Options. Okay, so here's the default lens flare. And really this doesn't matter. You can choose any lens flare you'd like. All of these are good. Just don't try to make it too overpowering. Like this one is a bit much. Really any of these will do. You can just look at them and choose your settings. Also, something that helps for a lot of these space scenes is to add some lens textures. So if you go to the lens texture image, you can change this to like coarse. You'll have this sort of grime on the lens. Usually you don't want something that's too harsh, so we can just scroll through these, and like dirty is a good one. And also another thing that you might want to add is a little bit of chromatic aberration. Usually I use the red and blue shift. So if you just increase this just a little bit, it helps just a little bit. Okay. And one more thing, if you go into the glow options, usually you'll find it. So here's glow. We'll change the dynamic triggering scale offset. You can really make it explode once it gets to the edge. So if we change the scale offset and the brightness offset a little bit, once it gets to the edge, it'll really get bright and really make it shine. I'm pretty happy with this, so let's go ahead and hit OK. Okay, so here's my lens flare. And the first thing I want to do is change the color just a little bit. So I'll just go over to my blue and we'll just change it to a little bit more of a bluish color. Right about there. That's pretty good. And we'll want to change this to a 3D lens flare. So let's go ahead and hit 3D. Okay, so now that it's a 3D lens flare, let's go ahead and change our transfer mode on this to screen. And if you don't see this, if you're seeing something like this and has all these faces of Squidward, no, just kidding. Just go to toggle switches and modes, and you'll see it right here, and just select screen. So there we go. And it's definitely not in the right position, so let's go ahead and change these values. Okay, so let's change our X position to about -22,000. Then we'll change our Y position to about -5,600. And then we'll change our Z position to about 82,000. And we'll need to change our brightness to about 129 and our scale to about 1,900. So there's our flare. Also the color is a little bit off, so we'll make this a little bit more green. It's right about there. Okay, so there we go. So just make sure you have all your values in the right places, and you should have something that looks sort of like this. Okay, so next let's add some color correction to our lens flare. The first thing let's do is let's add a curves adjustment. We'll just drag that underneath, and we'll just drag the middle down a little bit, sort of like this. Then we'll go to our green channel and we'll just drag this up a little bit. Okay, so that's pretty good. And then let's add a tint effect. So let's type in tint. And we'll drag this underneath. So this will turn it black and white. We don't necessarily want that. So let's change the mount to tint to about 44%. Okay, so we should have something that looks sort of like this now. Okay, so next let's go ahead and add some color correction. Okay, so next let's go ahead and add some glow. So we'll go to new layer, and we'll go to adjustment layer, and we'll label this as glow. So just select the layer, hit enter on your keyboard and type in glow. Okay, let's go over to our effects and presets window and type in glow. And then let's drag the glow onto our glow adjustment layer. And first let's change our glow colors to A and B colors. And then we'll change the glow threshold to about 30%. And then our glow radius to about 215. And our intensity to about 0.3. And then let's change our color A to more of a lighter blue. So right about there. And then we'll change our color B to more of a darker blue. So right about there. Okay, and then let's make one more glow. So we'll just duplicate this one. And let's just crank up the radius pretty far, and we'll change this to 0.1. So this is just giving us a little bit more haze around the planet. So we should have something that looks like this. There we go. And next, let's go ahead and add in some light rays. So let's go up to layer, new, adjustment layer. And we'll click on this, hit enter on our keyboard, and call this rays. And then let's go ahead and go over to our effects and presets folder again, and we'll type in CC radial fast blur. So there it is. And we'll drag this onto our rays adjustment layer. And as you can see, it's kind of a useless effect like this because it's just kind of messing up everything. So the trick is to change it from normal mode to lighten mode. Basically, this is only going to allow the brightest moments to have sort of like a casted light effect on everything. So what we'll do is we'll change our settings a little bit. So let's change our mount to about 94. Okay, that's pretty good. And it's a little bit too intense, so let's hit T on our keyboard and change the opacity to about 41%. So as you can see, that's kind of adding in sort of this light rays out of just the brightest parts of this planet. So it's a really neat effect, and you can move it around and you can really see how it's affecting everything. It makes it look really neat. You can place this pretty much anywhere, so if you wanted it coming from over here, it would cast like light off the side of the planet. It's a really neat effect, so you can play around with it and see what you like best. Okay, so next let's go ahead and duplicate our rays. So we'll click on it, duplicate it, and we'll call this rays flare. Okay, there we go. And let's just kind of scroll forward in our timeline, and we'll want the rays flare to be positioned on this side. sort of right there where the flare is. So as it's passing through, you get kind of this light effect. You can't really see it too much now, but once you add in color correction, it really does start to pop out and it looks really nice. All right, this is looking pretty good. We're adding in a lot of volumetric looking effects. I mean, if you shut off everything except element, I mean, you can really see how much that's actually adding to our scene. It's making it look really nice. So the next thing let's add is some color correction. So let's go up to Layer, New, Adjustment Layer, and we'll click on it, hit enter and type in CC. And we'll go over to the side and just type in curves. And then we'll just drag this over to our CC layer. And we can just start adjusting this. Okay, and I'll just keep tweaking this and I'll be right back as soon as I finish color correcting. Okay, so I just finished color correcting. One thing that we need to do is we need to enable cast shadows and ambient occlusion. So let's go over to our Element 3D layer and let's go into our render settings. And then we'll click on shadows and enable. And I'm going to change this to ray traced. So if we shut off our shadows, that's basically, it's adding in all of that. So it's really helping a lot. And then let's go ahead and go back to the beginning and let's add in our ambient occlusion. So we can just crank this up quite a bit. This is going to help especially in the areas of these asteroids in this scene. It's going to add in some nice shading around these areas. Okay, so let's go ahead and see what we have so far. Okay, so this is what we have so far. It looks really good. The only things that we'll need to adjust is the lens flare and add some motion blur. And also we can adjust the glow settings in Element 3D. So let's go into our Element 3D settings and then we'll go to glow. And let's go ahead and enable the glow. Okay. And next let's change the color of the glow to a really nice blue color. Something like this. And we can increase the intensity a little bit. And also increase the radius. You can see how that's adding in some glow. And that's coming from the duplicated planet where we added the illumination texture. So you can see how that's creating that nice sort of glow around the planet. There is one problem, and that is that the lens flare is rendering on top of these asteroids in this field right here. So an easy way to fix that is we can just duplicate the flare layer and put one below the Element 3D layer and one above the Element 3D layer. So what we can do is go down to our Element 3D layer and we'll just change this to draft rendering because all we have to see is where the flare is. So let's go forward and we'll have it fade off right before it gets to here. So what we'll do is we'll go to our flare and we'll hit T and we'll just change the opacity really quickly before it gets here. So we'll go a few frames forward and we'll just change this to 0%. And then next, let's go ahead and duplicate our flare layer and we'll just drag this all the way down below our Element 3D layer. And we'll hit T. And basically all we're going to do is swap these keyframes over. So this one will be turning on and this one will be turning off. So if you scroll through, so it's in front and then it's in back. You just have to make sure these keyframes are lined up in the exact same place. And you can also make this effect a little bit more gradual. So if you just go a few frames forward, sort of like that, then you kind of can't tell. And then as you can see, it kind of just goes behind the planets and it's behind this. So now let's go ahead and unsolo all of our layers. Let's go back into Element and we'll change this back to full render. Okay. So now if we play it just from that point, you'll see how the lens flare actually goes behind all of the rocks. There we go. So you can see it's being rendered behind all of the asteroids now. And we're also getting that nice light rays coming from that flare. Okay, there is one more thing missing, and that's the stars in the background. Okay, so the first thing we'll do is we'll go to Layer, New, Solid, and we'll label this as stars. And we'll change the width to 4,000 and the height to about 3,000. And okay. And we'll need to drag our stars layer all the way down below Element 3D and below our flare layer. Basically, your star should be below pretty much everything. So the next thing we'll do is go to our toggle switches and modes, and we'll click on the 3D switch, which is right here. and we'll hit P on our keyboard, which will bring up our position. And let's just bring the scale way back. Okay, so now let's go to our 7-second mark, which is the end of the animation. And let's just scale this up while holding down Shift, and that will scale it proportionally. So let's just do it right about there. Now if we just play the animation back. Okay, so now we can scale this down just a bit. Let's go back forward. Okay, so that looks good. Everything's in frame, and now we can go ahead and add in our stars. So the first thing we'll do is go over to our effects and presets window, and we'll type in fractal noise. Okay, so let's grab that, and we'll drag this onto our stars layer. And the reason why you're not seeing anything is because this layer is using lights in the scene to light this particular layer, and we don't want that. So let's go down to our stars layer and hit A twice, and we'll shut off except lights. So now it should be off, and you'll see it'll explode, but that's fine. All we have to do is change all of our settings in fractal noise. So the first thing we'll do is go into our transform settings, and we'll change the scale to about 7%. Okay, and then we'll change our contrast to about 1000, and then we'll change our brightness to about -370. Okay, so now you should see that these stars in the background. And also a neat trick to do, because if you look in the sky, some stars are brighter, and this is kind of a repeated pattern. It's just not very realistic. So the way to get more realistic stars is to create a track matte for these stars with another layer of fractal noise. Okay, so let's go ahead and duplicate our stars layer, and let's go ahead and hit reset. So this will reset it to the standard layout. Okay, let's go ahead and hold down Alt on our keyboard and click the little stopwatch on the evolution setting. You'll see this little option down here pop up, and all we have to type in is time times 800. And basically, if I play this back, what you'll see it's doing, it's basically just noise that's animating, and this is basically what's going to tell the stars to kind of twinkle and change. And let's go ahead and change our stars layer. So this is this layer right here. We'll just change this to stars matte. Okay, so we can unsolo that, and we'll change the track matte to luma matte. So now if I solo this layer, you can kind of see how some of these stars kind of twinkle in the background. You kind of change, it makes it look more realistic, and it really helps. And the final thing to do for this is to add in some motion blur. So let's go ahead and hit our motion blur switch, and we'll turn this on for the stars. I think that's about it. And we'll also go into our Element 3D settings and go to render settings and click on motion blur, and we'll change this to on. So you can kind of see how everything has this really fast looking motion now. You may see some duplicates, and that's because the motion blur samples isn't high enough. So if we change this to something like 18, you should see all of those duplicated layers disappear and become a little bit more smooth. Okay, so there we go. That looks pretty good. So now let's go ahead and hit render and see what we got. Okay, so here it is. This is our rendered scene. Everything looks good. Of course, you could change planets. Say if you wanted more of a fire looking planet, you could just change the illumination texture, and you can make things look completely different. Alright, well that's the end of this tutorial. Hopefully it showed you a little bit more on how to use Fractal Rama and Locus Pack together, and also some compositing techniques. So be sure to check out Fractal Rama and Locus Pack. If you get the bundle, you can save 20% off, so it's definitely saves you a lot of money. And also be sure to check us out on Twitter and on Facebook. If you have any questions or comments, please just leave them down below, and we'll be sure to reply to them. This has been Francis Check from Video Realm Media, and thanks for watching.